Good afternoon, everyone. It's already 5 minutes past our scheduled time. So we would like to get started, and I would like to now request our two distinguished guests, Matthieu Ricard and Dr. Bhagawan Koirala, to take the stage. Thank you. Welcome, Namaste and Tashidile. Today, amidst us, we have, two very special persons, and I'm personally honored and deeply humbled to be hosting this event. And this event is jointly organized by Kathmandu Institute of Child Health, KIOSH, that Dr. Bhagawan Koirala represents, and Karuna Sachin, Nepal. Karuna Sachin was co-established by Matthieu Ricard together with Rabjam Rinpoche. And until December of 2019, Matthieu served as its president of the organization, guiding and fostering its growth. Today, Karuna Sachin has programs in Nepal, France, and India, and we are also working with small organizations in countries like Bhutan and few other countries in South America. And from January of 2020, I have been working as a country director of this organization. Matthieu, despite being a Buddhist monk, Matthieu has ventured into many fields and, accomplished many outstanding achievements that has contributed to, greater understanding of humanity and many other areas. One of his many contributions is his selfless dedication for the upliftment of poor people in Nepal and other countries in this region. Karuna Sachin was specifically established because he did not want to do many things. He did not want anything to do with the funds that was being generated from his books and many other endeavors that he was doing. He's a prolific writer, he's a prolific photographer, and also he is involved in many research as well as public speaking events. So from all the money that was generated from it, he donated most of it to Karuna Sachin. And because of it, we were able to work in Nepal in many sectors and in many regions. And in our many sites also, in Kathmandu, we had such a clinic for 20 years, where we served many poor people, and also in many other remote areas we worked. In India, we have programs in very remote and deprived regions of Jharkhand and Bihar. But despite these staggering achievements in social work, I don't particularly consider Matthieu's involvement in social sector as his main contribution towards humanity. I want to recall an event that happened, and memory that happened in January of 2020. I was touring rural Nepal with this person who was visiting from France, and we went to many areas where we were working in remote villages, and we shared a lot of memories and interactions. But there is one thing that he said that has stood out to me ever since, and I want to quote him directly. And he said, "Matthieu is a Buddhist monk in his outer self, but he appeals to everyone. He has cut across religious and intellectual divide. In his ways, he does things. What he has to say about humanity, his life, and everything he does is very universal. So that is why he appeals to everyone in France." So you see, that is what, and he ended up saying, that is why he is like a rock star in France. So you see the monk over here is like a rock star in France, and we have yet to discover him in Nepal. So hopefully this event will help us realize the importance of Matthieu and his work and his visions. For me, his message is very simple. He's always asked us to be mindful in what we do and have compassion. We all have minds, we just need to be a little mindful. But it's not just his words that inspire us, it's his work, his presence, and his actions, that is always guiding us in our visions and in our work. As a country director of Karuna Sachin, I'm completely engaged in a lot of mundane things like reports, timelines, proposals, budgets, and all these things. And I really enjoy doing that. But this isn't the main reason why I joined the organization. You see, before Karuna, I came from this world of Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals. But when I came to Karuna, I discovered sustainable harmony that Matthieu so joyously propounds. After delving in this idea of sustainable harmony for many years, I am convinced that this is the best way that we can remain happy, create an equitable world and save our Mother Nature. And in Karuna Switch and through our work, we also try to embody this sustainable harmony. And for me, while I'm working in Karuna Sechin, to embody this vision of Matthieu to work towards sustainable harmony with altruism, with another of his tools, it has been a great relearning exercise for me. Many things, many theoretical, rigorous exercise that I was accustomed to before joining Karuna, I've had to relearn them and to relearn them to embody this vision of sustainable development. So I hope during this program that Matthieu can touch briefly on what sustainable harmony is and why is it so important, why sustainable development that UN and many other development agencies have championed might not be such a good idea, because we've frequently heard and speak about development, but harmony should be the priority rather than sustainable development. And also, Matthieu talks a lot about inner qualities and outer qualities. And the road to sustainable harmony is, for me, a balance of two worlds, where we work for the betterment of our outer world as well as inner world. So I would, hopefully, we can hear a lot about this transformation of mind as well as this transformation of this outer world when we hear Matthieu talk about sustainable harmony, altruism, and mental transformation. Our other speaker, Dr. Bhagawan Koirala, I think we all know who he is and what he stands for me. For me, he epitomizes hard work, discipline, creativity, and pure management skills. For 20 years, he has worked with patients, doctors, bureaucrats, and politicians in Nepal to navigate this murky water of medical industry in Nepal and create many shining examples. And this is a big achievement in itself, and I can frankly say I will never be able to do this in my lifetime at all. And also, appropriately, I'd like to take this opportunity to, salute him and thank him for this contribution to Nepal, and especially in the healthcare industry that he has made. For us, he is a shining example and something that we all want to strive towards achieving. But, despite all that he has achieved, he continues to work hard and have greater vision and greater ability to achieve them. His current undertaking of creating child health institutions in all 7 provinces of Nepal, where every children can get comprehensive medical institutions. This is a very massive undertaking and a very ambitious and a noble one also. So I'd like to wish him well on this, and I'm sure in 3 or 4 years' time, we can see this massive undertaking come to fruition. And we would really look forward to this health institutions being created by Dr. Koirala and his team. But this isn't this event isn't about, we're not trying to talk about the organizations that Dr. Koirala and Matthieu represents. We are trying to bring here 2 extraordinary examples and learn from them. And the timing is also very appropriate because Matthieu came to Nepal after 2 years because of COVID. He has been away, and he is leaving tomorrow. So, it was very challenging for us to squeeze in this program, but we are very happy that this has happened. I don't want to talk long, but before I invite Dr. Koirala, I have a small photo to share. There are 2 images there from 2 countries, France and Nepal. We took this image out from Google Earth, so it doesn't look really great, but it more or less wants to depict what I want to talk about. The one is from a very remote village in Palpa, and this place is called Durange in Archala. And I'm sure Dr. Bhagawan Koirala knows this because this is the village that gave us Dr. Koirala. And the other image is from, this is a challenge for me, Aix-les-Bains. This is where Matthieu was born, some 7,200 kilometers away from Dr. Koirala's birthplace. So today we can call it faith, or as a result of their active contribution to humanity, that these two great gentlemen, who were born 7,200 kilometers away, are here amidst us. And we can rejoice this occasion by learning and listening from them and getting inspired from them. So without any delay, I'd like to invite Professor, Cardiosurgeon, Manager, and Social Worker, Dr. Bhagawan Koirala.
Thank you, Salavji. What a wonderful afternoon. Great friend Matthieu Ricard and Your Excellency and Excellencies, Professor Kedar Bhakta, and great friends of mine and some unknown faces here. But I'm really humbled and honored to be here today. Honestly, I feel very awkward and probably not really fitting in terms of sharing with you the ideas that hopefully will give some lessons while Matthieu is sitting on my side. So, but I'm going to have to do what I'm supposed to do, and I'll probably continue to speak on some of the topics that bother me. Rather than giving the solutions to the problem, I probably would share my observations from my professional practice, and including some of the scientific things that we say are scientific, and that I keep asking questions to myself and try to teach myself. So let it be some of the observations and questions to Matthieu, so that he can also address them and maybe give us some solutions to our intellectual problems that I face in my daily practice. If some of the observations are useful too, I'll be more than happy to kind of get that feedback. But rather than giving the solution, I'll probably be asking questions myself. How did you get here? I think Salav very eloquently described on the background of this. This is such an important event after the Nepal is open, and generally the world is open after COVID, and we've all learned lessons of life. And I think it's such an important thing for us to realize that we're able to sit here together, enjoying our normal life, and be able to kind of meet and greet like this. So in itself is a lesson for myself that we should consider that our life is not permanent. Anything we do, that needs to be done on time, with mindfulness, as I learn things from him. I had heard of Matthieu a long time ago, and my friend Vijay Kumar had mentioned about him 3 years ago, and we hoped to meet sometime. And then it such happened 10 days ago that I first met him, and in the first 3 minutes, we clicked. And I said, you don't need a lot of introduction to be used to each other and kind of have the same mindset. And that happens with many people, by the way. Sometimes you talk for hours and you just don't relate to each other. Sometimes you just click and you have the same wavelength. And we work for similar causes, same cause, in fact, in a cause of greater humanity. And I shared some of the ideas that I had, and he was so gracious to encourage and agree to continue on collaborating and working together. All my life, I think Salav showed the area. I'm not sure that's my village. My village used to be a little flatter than that. But yes, I come from Palpa, west of Nepal, which is beautiful Tansen. But I was born outside of Tansen, 2 hours walk from Tansen itself, where there was no motor road when I was born. But ever since I came from that township to Kathmandu after my grade 10, I didn't know. I had very little knowledge of English. I couldn't communicate in my college. And I flunked in the first internal assessment of my, +2 examination. So I had all that long story, but I would not probably get into that now. I always believed that, doing karma, as some Hindu philosophies also tell, without expecting the results, you just do your karma and things will fall on their own places. I'm not sure I'm a spiritual man that way. But I need to learn a lot of things, and how do we address some of these things beyond physical, beyond materialistic. But I always believe that doing karma, trying to be helpful to others and trying to be useful to the society probably does most of my duty. And I kept doing that without trying to understand the philosophies and the spiritualities behind that. I tried to learn humility, but the compassion and empathy, what we call in medical language. And I guess today we'll be enlightened by Matthieu on some of these terminologies that I have a hard time understanding, but I just have the feeling, trying to be useful, be honest, unconditional service. I think those are the things that I understand. At least I try to understand and try to put in my practice. Today, actually, the topic was selected basically without thinking much. How do we connect each other? I'm a heart guy, he's a mind guy. So we just said, let's call it heart and mind talk. So everybody's free to talk on their own. So I guess that's how the theme of the talk is coined. But I'll try to connect these two functions of our body. Let me tell you that worldwide, including Nepal, we have. As a doctor, I'm obligated to share some of these medical problems that we encounter and the scale of the problems that we have. The two commonest diseases and the problems we have in Nepal. Of course, that applies to any Western world or any other country also, except few maybe. The mental health and the cardiovascular diseases. And mental health, affects more than 20% of our population, worse with our pandemic. Because it's tremendously rocketed the problems of mental health, depression, anxiety, and including severe depression leading to surge in the suicide in our society right here. And the other one being cardiovascular diseases. And, in Nepal itself, the non-communicable diseases, what we call, 5 major diseases, heart, cancer, diabetes, kidney problems, and COPD, or these lung issues, cause 71% of all deaths happening in Nepal. That's a massive number. If you add the injuries, which again are either trauma, accidents, suicide, homicide, and falls, altogether, it becomes 79% of the deaths in Nepal. It's massive. So I think there's a lot that we need to understand and understand the root causes of those problems and try and avert them if at all possible. And many of those risk factors are related to our mental state, and I think a lot of that is preventable. Of course, not just by probably spiritual exercise, but there are some other things that we need to do. But I think the major diseases are heart conditions that kill about 20% of all deaths. 20% is comprised of cardiac conditions, and another 20% they don't kill, but they put off people off work. High DALY is what we call in public health terminologies, the disease-adjusted life years, meaning that people are not productive, the economy goes down, they're suffering, the quality of life is gone. So I think it's a huge problem in itself, these two conditions. So I think it's worthwhile trying to draw some common linkages between these two. If I become too boring, somebody might just wave hand in the back, and I would try and sneak out easily. But I think there is a lot of commonality between these two conditions. If we talk about the mental health, as a depression, anxiety, especially the hostility, unexpressed hostility, are proven to cause heart attacks. Proven. And there's a number of publications in the world that this high level of noradrenaline level in our body, because either you're too stressed or you don't know how to manage stress, or you have a workload such that you cannot manage that. For whatever reason, the long-standing continuous stress causes high levels of these hormones and the what we call catecholamines in our body. They cause damage of the blood vessels and cause stress to the heart and the high likelihood of having heart attack, high blood pressure, and other consequences, which blood pressure again causes a lot of other problems. And secondly, there are other things. Depression itself may lead to increased tendency to eat, and then lack of interest in exercises. So basically it distorts the whole lifestyle of ours, and then again it leads to poor lifestyle. And there are other direct effects from stress to heart. There are different defined heart conditions that are related directly to the constant stress, not just blood pressure and then possible heart attacks. And anybody who has heart condition, this stress, anxiety will cause increased morbidity and mortality. So there is a direct effect of mental health on heart conditions. It's proven what I hear and read and see from our literature. Reverse is also true. If we have heart conditions, there will be a lot of effect on our mental state. And we know that. That's very simple. If somebody feels that he is sick, it can cause not just a stroke, but also hypertension would cause you a stroke, but also somebody who feels that his heart is not well, then he would have a lot of pressure on his mental state, causing anxiety, increased anxiety, and probably depression at times, and the quality of life is poor. It's all gone into a vicious cycle. So basically, each of these disease conditions provoke the other side. So I think there is a need to understand the risk factors of all the heart diseases. Of course, as I said, there are other factors that are out of our control, beyond our control, like the age, the genetics, and some of the invariable things that we have to do in our life, pollution that we have to face in our cities. Those are beyond our personal control, but there are a lot of things that we could do to prevent them. So I think in short, there is a close interaction between heart and mind, and I think we need to find some cross-linkage. Well, if we hit, we could break that vicious cycle. And I think the topic today would be largely focusing on how would you influence, your state of mind, and I guess there would be a lot more coming from Matthieu. But I would really like to hear how do you help to break this vicious cycle of mind-heart, confounding effect on each other's disease. Now, I have another reason to be here, and I applaud Matthieu's contribution in the medical science itself. And Salav probably forgot to mention that during his introduction, and I have not really read that manual, honestly, but Matthieu has written a manual on how to do pediatric meditation. So he's well versed and in a way scientist himself, how to train, educate children to be mindful, to do the meditation. So I think it relates to our work as to how to keep our young children and adolescents spiritually healthy. And by the way, did you mention that Matthieu had a PhD in molecular genetics in 1970s? And he did a lot of neurological research in neurological sciences, worked with a lot of big scientists in US and in France. His father was a philosopher. Of course, that seems to be inherited across. But that kind of gives the authenticity of whatever we're going to hear and listen. I feel really awkward standing longer. You give me 30 minutes, I'm going to pass on 15 more minutes to you so that we can hear more. So I would rather answer your questions. I feel comfortable. I'm a technical guy, I was so poor in writing essays in my childhood. They asked me to write an essay on a cow. And I said, it has 4 legs, it gives us milk, and then I stopped. I don't know anything else. And I stopped in grade 6. I'm poor in writing essays. I cannot kind of amplify things like that. So I'm a bullet point guy. I remember points, this works, this does not, this is right, this is wrong, and this is how I do, and I'm a technical guy. So I would rather stick to my bullet points and probably leave the function of explanation, convincing, and more to Matthieu. All I can say is, somebody said, if you want to find yourself, it's the best way to find yourself to lose yourself in others' service. Kind of very profound expression. And I, as a growing professional, I try to help people unconditionally, that's for sure. But I think there was something that I had kind of some sort of selfishness in myself that, okay, I do this, I would grow, I would have name, and no monetary thing, but still. Now I realize truly as I grow older, probably because of the new initiatives that we were contemplating on a big scale, if you focus on yourself, you start suffering more. That's my own personal experience. You have more time to talk about your tiny little things in family, with the neighborhood. You fight for nothing. You spend time thinking about others. Every time you go out and work with community, you see a lot more people suffering than yourself. And that is a lesson. And I've learned, if you start working for others, you forget about your problems. And I think you are happier because then you spend time thinking about others. And that's a lifetime lesson that I've learned. If that relates to you, probably would be useful. And I would probably I'll wrap up my, my talk, if you like this, by quoting a Singaporean plastic surgeon. Young, talented, brilliant, US-trained plastic surgeon, handsome, in Singapore. That was a big story. And, he was rich, he was practicing, made a lot of money. I've shared that story some time ago, and that was published. And unfortunately, this guy got cancer at the age of, late 30s or early 40s. His career was doomed. He was flourishing. He had everything that he wanted materialistically. And I remember him saying, I didn't realize that life will be so short. I don't know what to do. And there was no way any medicine would kind of keep him longer. I didn't really realize that life would be so short. If I knew, I would probably live a different way. And he said, and he was thinking about, how am I going to die? What would be my last days look like, feel like? And how do I look in front of the public? How would they perceive about my work, life, and the death? And he concluded for himself, and I think that's what I think is right for us to do. If I knew how to die, then I would know how to live now. So I think that's something that I put forward as an agenda for discussion and thinking through. With this, I would probably stop here and invite my great friend here, and I'd rather listen to you. And thank you very much. Great to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagawan Koirala, for being finishing it 10 minutes ahead and giving Matthieu more time. I have a mic with me, so, we can keep Matthieu seated and he can talk more. So firstly, we'd like to thank Dr. Bhagawan Koirala. Two examples of community work and how we get lost in the community work, and the quote from that plastic surgeon is really profound, and it shows the amount of experience that you have. And it is also a guiding light for us, and because we are all involved in social sector also, and this is a wonderful example. So thank you, Dr. Koirala, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, as Dr. Koirala said that he wanted questions from you, so please save that for the talk after Matthieu. So please, Matthieu, and a couple of things I forgot for Matthieu's introduction, which Dr. Koirala already said. He has many things, and it's all difficult to summarize in 5 minutes. I tried my best, but Matthieu is here in front of us. So, please go ahead, Matthieu.
So I'm sorry to stay seated. Is it okay for you? You want me to stand in the back? It's okay? The monks are quite lazy, and also if I make mistake, they can correct me if I'm nearby. So thank you so much, Dr. Samish. Thank you, Shalav. You described me as a, you say you are a heart guy and brain guy. I'm afraid my neuroscientist colleague told me that I had a brain, but they said there's nothing left in the right side and nothing right in the left side. So they say it's hopeless. So anyway, it's good because my heart is still running. Okay. And I think, good heart is, a good heart is also a healthy heart. A good heart in the sense of kindness, compassion, openness to others, less self-centeredness. You mentioned the study about aggressivity. Interestingly enough, there's also a study about analyzing the language of people. How much they employ me, mine, etc., compared to average people. And then they correlated that precisely with heart problem and other things. And those who are excessively self-centered, it also turned that they have more heart attacks and things like that. So, of course, me also lead to aggressivity, because if your world is reduced to the bubble of self-centeredness, and it's kind of stuffy in the bubble of the ego, So that means the rest of the world is seen either as an instrument for the, achieving your self-centered goals, or as a threat to those goals. So you divide the world in attraction, repulsion, and completely centered upon yourself, which is very, not only unhealthy, but unrealistic, because we are so deeply interconnected. And so, first of all, someone said, can we do a selfie? There's no self, so you do selfless selfie. How do you do that? So anyway, so if you look carefully according to Buddhist philosophy, the mind or consciousness is a dynamic stream of experience. So of course there is a person, that is our history, which is not the same. In the same way that there is the Ganga is not the same as the Mississippi River. But there's no such thing as a little head popping up from time to time saying, I'm the real Ganga, don't forget. So there's no such thing. It's a dynamic stream. So if we verify that as a me, that is really the heart of my being, and then we divide me and the rest of the world and what is mine and everything, many psychological studies have shown that this exacerbated sense of self-importance actually doesn't bring happiness. You look for so-called hedonic happiness, endless succession of pleasant sensation, which is a recipe for exhaustion, basically. It doesn't work as happiness. And you fail, actually, to do so. So many studies have shown that. While if you are left self-centered, if you really open your heart so that no one is left out of your heart, then you don't have also the sense of being vulnerable, because you don't constantly try to protect yourself and see the world as a possible instrument for maximizing your personal preferences. And the universe is not a mail-order catalog for your desire and your fancies. And even it was so, there's 7 billion being used in the same catalog, and they cannot, the world cannot be what all they want it to be. So it simply doesn't work. Not only is it a very unpleasant situation, me all day long, but it assumes that you are a separate entity, that we relate like snooker balls that sometimes bump into each other. But we don't realize that this is bound to fail because it's at odds with reality. Reality is not made of separate entities. Even things are not as solidly existing as they seem. The eye is not such a solid thing as it seems, although we feel like that. And so if we based our reactions towards the world on this, it's not going to work. So it's frustration. Not only it makes you unhappy, but you make everyone unhappy. Now, if you realize the profound interconnectedness, the interdependence of everything, the fact that things relate, but they are not as solid as they seem, they are not made of separate entities, autonomous entities, then this is opening the door, or laying the foundation for compassion. Because you realize your common humanity, your common sentience, even with 8 million other species which are co-citizens in this world. We realize that deep within, when I wake up in the morning, I don't wish, may I suffer the whole day and if possible my whole life. So then, if you transport yourself, and it's not rocket science to look at others, just I might be confused and look for happiness in the wrong place and actually be addicted to the cause of suffering, and it happens so often in life out of confusion and ignorance. But deep within, no one wants willingly to suffer for good. So if I acknowledge that in myself, then I say, okay, now what are the means to accumulate, to avoid what brings suffering, and try to build up what brings well-being. And then if I value that, I'm concerned by that, I'm going to discriminate in my action, not harming others and so forth. Otherwise, as our teacher, the Rokensei Moshe, used to say, you can't keep your hand in the fire and hope not to be burned. So the law of cause and effect works in that way. So if you realize that, then others, in the same way, they don't want to suffer. So that's the basis of our common humanity, because then you can become concerned by others' fate. And then if you are concerned, you're going also to act in an ethical way that doesn't bring suffering, but bring happiness. So that is also why the Dalai Lama said, good heart, my religion is good heart. It could look like something very banal, but of course when someone like him, who has an immense heart, says that, it takes a very profound resonance. So there is a correlation between having good heart and a physical good heart, but you will notice that there's no such correlation with intelligence. Intelligence is ethically neutral. Now, those guys who did 9/11, they were very smart to do all that with a few razor blades and good planning. So an instrument can do a lot of good, in the case of human, more than any other species, immense good and also immense devastation. We just have to see how a psychotic mind somewhere now is doing so incredible, ununderstandable suffering to poor people who never, there's no reason to do those wholesale massacres as it happened now in Ukraine and other places as well. So it's the mind, it's intelligence which has planned that. It's certainly not the heart, the good heart. So good heart has a ethical value, intelligence doesn't. Like a hammer can be used to build or to break. So that's why it's so important that the good heart is a question. Now, we may question, but I mean, I got a few recently question from. It's funny, it was a photo exhibit. I didn't expect a question like that. But don't you lose hope in humanity? Because I'm doing an exhibit in France about hymn to beauty, beauty of human, spiritual beauty, with some great masters and who embody love and compassion, men and women, and human beauty, that the potential for kindness and goodness that we have, and the beauty of our environment, which will. If we are in wonderment with our natural environment, naturally we respect. We don't want to destroy what makes us in awe. If I found this flower beautiful, I'm not going just to next moment to trample on it. And so if we are concerned, we act to protect. So this is in this. So when they say, don't you lose hope in humanity with all what's happening and everything? So of course, terrible things happen in the past. They happen now. They always happen somewhere in the world. Sometimes this madness is exacerbated and leads to sort of like a sudden increase in those suffering. But altogether, of course, nowadays we know exactly what happens anytime in real time in the world. So now there is a especially grave crisis. But altogether, if we look, and if we say that, most people think it's just completely naive and cuckoo. But there's a Harvard psychologist called Steven Pinker. He wrote a very well-documented book based on so many research about the decline of violence. It's called The Better Angels of our nature in English. So he looked at all the numbers since, throughout history. And clearly, although there are incredible tragedies, unexplainable, unexcusable, but violence has significantly diminished in the world as we promulgated human rights, women's rights, children's rights, abolition of torture, and so forth. And so even nothing is perfect yet. It's still slavery, there's still torture, but at least it's not supposed to be legal. Just to give you a quick example, because when he asked people himself, they don't see the point. If you look at the rate of homicide in Europe, there were good data in UK in the 14th century. It was about 100 homicides per year for 100,000 persons. Now it's 1 average in Europe. So it's not 10% less, 30%, it's 100 times less. The average number of casualty in wars, whether it's civil wars, any kinds of wars, after the Second World War, has gone down 30 times over 60 years. Although there are things like Ukraine, the Iraq, Iran wars, and so forth. So there are many reasons for that. Democracy. I mean, mostly those wars are from nations who are not democratic. Democracy increases the role of women. It's very important, you know, if a woman has 8 kids because she has no say about it, like in some places, then she also can't control them, and the society is poor, and there's increased violence. Exchanging. It's, you know, in Europe, in the, I think, still Middle Age, there was 500 small entities, you know, principalities, dukes, and so forth, and they all always fighting against each other, invading one year, then 3 years later the other one will invade, and they will burn the field, maim the peasants, all kinds of things. Constant violence, in fact. Now there is about 30 entities, mostly democratic. You know, very unlikely Belgium will go at war against Italy nowadays. So it has changed a lot for the good. Exchanging. Before we didn't exchange so much all through the world. So if you exchange with someone with mutual benefits, they better be alive. So all these things makes that somehow violence has decreased. Now, that may say, okay, well, that's a view of things, although it's based on solid research. But also, if you look at children, and you know your mission is to give children a new lease of life when their life is threatened because their most vital organ is not working properly. What better gift can you do to someone who has a whole potential of life ahead of her or him than, you know, allow that potential to be expressed and that person to fulfill their aspiration for the happiness of also the parents and everyone. So that's to make a more happy society when children pass away less. And this is about also child and mother and child mortality. You know, in Tibet, where we were doing our programs, once we did a survey of 300 mothers of all ages. Of course, they have 6, 7 children. 80% of mothers had lost a child at some point in their life. I mean, not necessarily at birth. So it's still very prevalent. I don't know what's the rate in Nepal. So all these things are preventable, and anything we can do is that. But childhood is a good place to see, you know, about the dispute about human nature. So is human nature basically bad, as some philosopher like Hobbes and all that were thinking? It's only the government and society who sort of control them so that they don't kill each other at all times. You know, Winston Churchill said history has been just a part of humanity at war against the other all through history. So is that the case? Or as a social animal, or do we have a greater predisposition to appreciate love and kindness and give it and cooperate? So, you know, there have been theologians saying that we are little brute beasts early, and then we sort of socialize. That was the view of Sigmund Freud, for instance. But scientific study, and that's where it becomes, you know, interesting, because you do study how the children behave, and then you make conclusion out of it. So there's many great researchers who did that, including in the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Warneken and Tomasello, to just mention them, who study very young children, from 1 year old to 4. And then they first look at how cooperative they are. For instance, children would play in a room with or without their parents, and someone will be sitting on a stool and drop something, a pen. Not intentionally, but by accident. And you see that 90% of the kids, they drop what they do, even playing, and run towards picking up that and give it to the person. Even you put some obstacle, like balloons, they go over it or around it to do that. And if the guy throws it, they don't move. They really see that he needs help. So there are many experiments like that. And they even then did that with chimpanzees. So we also do that, you know, although for instance, they threw chimpanzee in 2 different cages, and one, there's food there, so one chimpanzee could get it if the other one helped him with the mechanism, but the other one is not going to get the food. is simply going to help his friend to get the food. So the other one is sort of, they sort of bang a little bit and say, do something. And then eventually they do it. And also you do something where they need to both pull a rope together to get food. The tray comes to their cage. But on one of them, they fed him like anything 10 minutes before, so he's not hungry at all. So he has no interest to pull the rope. But the other one is hungry and sees that, and he sort of says, hey, pull the rope. And he does it. So you see, so their conclusion was that it's already started for our common ancestor 5 million years ago, 5 million years ago. So there is a natural predisposition to cooperate. Until 5 years old, children are almost unconditionally cooperative. There's a great study done in Yale University where very small babies, like 8-month-old or 1 year old, and you show them a box, and there is 2 puppets. One puppet is trying to open that box and doesn't succeed, like say a blue puppet. Then a yellow puppet comes and helps to open the box. Okay. Then you do the same thing, but instead of a yellow puppet coming to help, a red puppet comes, and when the box is half open, you slam it back. Okay, no nasty puppet. Then an experimenter who doesn't know which is what, so he doesn't sort of say, hey, you want this one, this is the good one. So the other experimenter doesn't know which is the good and bad puppet, just show like that to the baby. Like 1 year old, he looks like this, and then 90% take the helping puppet. That means it's not towards them. The 2 people behaving nicely or not toward each other, and naturally they prefer that. Now with 3-month-old babies, of course they were not going to catch a puppet, but they look where their gaze is going. Are they looking at the nice puppet or the nasty one? 90% again prefer at 3 months old. So this is something that is not learned, that is not because of reward. It is something innate. So we can become psychopath, we can commit mass murder, genocide, all kinds of terrible things, but this is more like a deviation. So, Hannah Arendt spoke of the banality of evil, speaking of Adolf Eichmann and other Nazis who were seemingly ordinary bureaucrats and end up, being the cause of the death of millions of people. But there's also, we could speak of banality of goodness. That is, most of the time, most of 7 billion human beings behave decently with each other. And we don't notice because that's our baseline. That is our default mode. We don't. So, okay, let's make an experiment. Today, when you go out, are you going to congratulate yourself because nobody start punching each other? No, you are not. This is normal. Now, if 2 people start punching each other, after 1 week, people will say, there's Dr. Koirala and these funny monks were there speaking about altruism and good heart, and those 2 guys start bashing each other. That will be the talk of the evening. That means it's a deviation. That's why we pay attention to it. That's why the media pays so much attention to it. Because evolution has equipped us to react to some potential threat. If you hear a loud bang, something happened, maybe dangerous. If 2 people fight, something terrible could happen. So we need to bring our attention on that. Otherwise, we relax. It means that, the media are so fascinated, and we also, by violence, that there's a distorted proportion of reporting on it. I remember once being called for, I don't know for which reason, to one French TV, and they said, okay, we are going to ask you to comment the first item of the news. So they gave me the list. I said, don't you have something nice that happened in the world? There's plenty. It was all catastrophe, murder, something. So we lose trust in human nature. So now to complete quickly with the children, because it's quite interesting. You may say, okay, now if they are so gullible, cooperative, they are going to be exploited by others. So it's interesting that at 5 years old, when their emotional brain and sort of more cognitive control comes in, they start sort of discriminate between people who reciprocate, who behave nicely with them and others. So they begin to say, okay, not everyone is a nice guy. I should be a little bit careful and protect myself and my dear ones. So you could say, well, that's a healthy reaction, but it should not go too far either. Then because, again, you my group, in-group, out-group, and then you start again making a big sort of, distance between you and others. So interestingly, there's a third age, briefly, I mean, this is such a nice story. Around 12 years old, then children again open in different way, a more abstract way. For instance, a group of school children could collect funds for kids in Afghanistan, even they do so in Europe. So they start thinking, not the child they have in front of them who suffers and they feel empathy. So all this needs to be known and also encouraged so that children can bloom into good human beings, so they can thrive in their own life and be good for society. So, yes. So, you are trying to do that. We are trying to do that in Karuna, just to very quickly, we started, as my dear friend Shalav said 20 years ago, very small with Kempo, Ramjamboshe, Raphael was here in Tibet and a few other friends. And it was very small. We were like, it was like the far west of the humanitarian, I mean, not organized at all. But gradually, he kindly spoke about me giving 100% of my books, but that would definitely not be enough to what we do today, which is we help 400,000 people every year in different ways, in India, Nepal, and a little bit in Tibet, and we start in France, and we have a few places elsewhere. So in the field of health, education, social services, trying to serve the most impoverished people, populations, and also empowerment of women, very important. In India, we have a lot of women adult literacy program, and also professional training. In India, over the last 2 years, we did 60,000 kitchen gardens. They're monoculture, so they buy their own food at the markets, which is ridiculous for farmers. So we give them different plants, and they grow their own vegetables, they exchange. So we do that in Nepal also in many ways. So this we try to help, and many other people fortunately join us, because I can't churn a book every week. And anyway, I'm too old now to do that, but fortunately it's going on. So that's a wonderful thing, and what we do, we see if we can find ways to cooperate. But to put that in action is very important. And I must say in my personal life, thanks to my great teachers, Khyentse Rinpoche and others, and the Dalai Lama, who always says compassion, compassion, compassion. So truly I felt how crucial and central the notion of altruism and compassion is. And it's very wonderful to try to cultivate in your own heart, because if we don't, then we have nothing to give. We are like a beggar who wants to give a banquet to 100 beggars. I mean, what can he give or she give? So we need to have something to give if we want to do so. So we need to cultivate compassion in the first place. So in a way, the best way to prepare for running an NGO would be maybe to do a retreat on growing compassion seriously from the depth of our heart, to magnify it. And it's not like bodybuilding, there's a limit, or jumping. You cannot jump 5 meters. We jump 240 meters, but we'll never jump 5 meters. But why compassion should be limited? Why can't you double it or multiply almost infinitely? Because it's a qualitative state of mind. It has no bonds. Only the bonds that you put. So when someone said, the Buddhist idea of unconditional love is very unrealistic. I mean, Jonathan Haidt, which is a very well-known philosopher in the United States, this is crazy, you should help your kids first, and the Dalai Lama's thing is just unrealistic. I said, look, it's not, the guy who wakes up in the morning thinking I'm going to help all the world, I mean, of course, he's going to calm down, I guess. But the point is, not to leave anyone out of your heart. You are not going to be able to do so, but there's so many people who leave so many others out of their heart, and they discriminate for so many reasons based on anything you can imagine, religion, the creed, age, sex, caste, whatever. And so they say, okay, I'm going to help those ones, but not those bad guys. So there's no such thing as bad guys. There's only people who are sort of sick in their mind and sick in their heart. You know, if you look at with the eye of a physician, if you see a dangerous mad person, the psychiatrist is not going to take a big stick and bang on that person's head. He might control him for a while and then see, can I cure that person from that mad sickness or not? So with that idea, even a bloody dictator, you may see how can possibly on the short or the long term change that person or change the culture from which that person arose. So seeing more like a healing hate and healing all those things that are the cause of suffering. Compassion is not per se a moral judgment. Of course, ethic is a very important affair. But compassion is more about remedying to the cause of suffering, whatever they might be and wherever they are. So a bloody dictator, that's the one that is now in action, in a way is a cause of immense suffering. So compassion is how can we remedy that suffering? Not by hate, but by trying to all possible means to neutralize the violence if we can, but also remedy the causes that made that possible at all. It should not happen. That means something went wrong in education, in institution, in political system, that such person can gain such power with such a harmful mind. So this is where compassion can be applied to even the worst people we can imagine. I remember a French intellectual told me, your compassion, this is really so stupid. Look, those Tibetans who have compassion for the Chinese, this is stupid. I told him, this is not about that. This is about remedying to the cause of suffering. And even those who suffer, you know, at the time of where there was labor camps in Tibet, I remember one of the physicians of the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Chotra, he said among his group of 60 people, 5 or 10 survive only. And he said in his case, and all those, if he had felt hate all the time for the people who were torturing him, he said he would not have survived. He said definitely. And those who had hate, they said they sort of faded away and died of famine and sickness and so forth. He said, I saw that there were young people indoctrinated, you know, brainwashed and all that. And I managed to feel some compassion. And he said, that saved me. So, okay, if you say that, you know, casually, you say, oh, easy for you, you know, but he went through that for so many years. And likewise, I met people who were tortured in the Argentinian jail at the time of the generals. And one of my philosopher friend, Miquel Benasayak, he was tortured a lot. And he said, deep within, I kept my human dignity and I never feel hate. I thought were mad people. And he said, somehow that saved me. So that's, I think, to preserve our sanity, we need to keep that compassion and that good heart. So, you know, sorry, in France they have something called the blabla car. It's, you know, you share car. So I'm the blabla monk, so it's non-stop. So anyway, you talk of sustainable harmony. Maybe I say a few words because it's an interesting concept, although it didn't pick up very much. Once there was a report on positive economy that was given to the French president, François Hollande, and somehow I was part of that, I don't know why. So I presented that concept, and François Hollande, oh, that's a very interesting concept, but then that didn't go anywhere. He said, see you soon, that's all. Anyway, so I think sustainable development, of course, is great, but we always feel it's quantitative development, you know, to do more of this, more of that. And we can't, because we don't have 3 planets, we don't have 5 planets. By August now, we have exhausted the renewable part of Earth's resources. So this is untenable. We know more and more, and still we don't do by far what is necessary out of difficulty for politicians to decide. So basically, the Winston Churchill said, a politician looks for next election. Tomorrow we have something to do about that. And then a statesman is looking at the next generation. So there is more than time to look at the next generation. It's almost late. I mean, all the scientists of the environment, and I know intimately quite a few of them, say we have 6-7 years. And each time they say it's still possible, but we have 6, 7 years and it needs drastic change. So what the politicians say is still possible. You see, it's possible. They say it's possible. But possible, yes, but at what cost? At changing dramatically the way we live. And that's, usually they're not ready to do that. You know, so sustainable development is this little bit suspicious of quantitative. So sustainable harmony is basically the same, but is doing better with less. So it's called like a sort of, you know, happy simplicity, or happy being more content and having a better quality of life, not in a sort of consumerism and materialistic way. There have been studies showing actually that the most consummation and materialistic minded people, there's been a 20-year study in Rochester University, compared to the less sort of, you know, materialistic and consumerism minded people. Those who are the most, 25% most sort of what we call extrinsic values, you know, your car, where your clothes look, your social status and all that. Usually they look for, again, hedonic happiness, you know, pleasant sensation, and they start not so happy. They are less healthy because they tend to abuse of all kinds of things. They have a lot of social relations, but less real friends. They are less concerned about holistic questions like, you know, poverty in the midst of plenty, and the environment and world health and so forth. They are more obsessed with debt, strangely. So anyway, he said that Tim Kasser, who did this study, said, well, I'm not a moral philosopher, but if you want to be happy, have good friends, and you know, be concerned by the global issues and so forth, you better be like those who value more intrinsic value, which is the quality of human relationship. That's one of the main factors of well-being, in fact. All the studies shows that as well. You will be healthier, you will be happier, more like what the Greek call eudaimonia, which is a sense of flourishing and thriving, which is more not just like sensation. So, you know, there's all these things. If we were to do that, do better with less, we can do it, but we cannot keep on adding to our endless needs. So this sustainable harmony is to remain in harmony with nature instead of using it in an unsustainable way. And it's also, sustainable harmony now is about remaining to social justice in the sense of poverty in the midst of plenty. You know, just to say very quickly, the model of the Homo economicus is to maximize personal preferences. So, and then so-called using the voice of reason. That's all the modern economy is based on that. But I have a friend called Dennis Noer, who is a great economist. He says the voice of reason alone cannot deal with two things. Poverty in the midst of plenty. You have reason has no reason. Reason cannot tell you if you are only interested in maximizing your interest to pay someone more with those T-shirts in Bangladesh that you sell in France or somewhere. It needs to care. And then the problem of the common. Common is the environment, you know, democracy, advancement of science. You have to step out of maximizing your personal interest. So he said we need the voice of care. So, and then if we do so, then social harmony and sustainable harmony. So in a way, just to conclude my blah talk, I came to really be intimately convinced, both at the light of Buddhist teaching, at the light of examples like Dr. Koirala and others, like my dear friend Dr. Ruiz and others, that benevolence, I mean, having more consideration for others, altruism, is really the most pragmatic answer to the challenges of the 21st century. So briefly, today we have a difficulty to reconcile the three time scale, the short term. You know, someone needs a heart operation. A mother in somewhere in South India or in the Terai needs to feed her kids for the next week and she doesn't have what it takes. Or economies to do this super fast investment now in New Jersey where every second they do millions of transactions, completely crazy. And also looking at the return at the end of the month. So that's the short term. So then you have to reconcile that with the midterm. Midterm is a lifetime or a career, family, 20 years, a generation. And what is the main thing we are looking for? Somehow to flourish in life. We need to fulfill our natural aspiration for well-being, happiness, for having a good life. If a country is the most powerful and the richest, everyone is feeling miserable, what's the point? So that's, of course, needs to take in consideration in everything we do, in the way we organize work, transports, social fabric, and so forth. And then there's a new challenge that we didn't have 10,000 years ago. There were only 5 million people on Earth. And that challenge is now we are the main force that shapes the future of our planet. Now, when we are 5 million, that much we could do. Now we are 7 billion. Our power has increased exponentially. Before we had things that we could throw. Now we have, atomic power, electricity, fossil fuels, all kinds of things, the internet. So our power has been magnified perhaps billionfold, but our care has not been magnified to the same extent. So that unbalance, we did a meeting in Brussels with the Dalai Lama Mind and Life Institute called Power and Care. How to rebalance that? How to bring care in power, to make it a force for good. So in the long term, having more consideration for others demands that we care for future generations. Otherwise, they'll say, you knew and you did nothing. And their fate is in our hands today. So if we are selfish, there's no environment problem because we won't be there in 100 years. My favorite Marxist is Groucho Marx. I don't know who knows Groucho Marx. But he said, why should I care for future generation? What did they do for me? But I heard Stephen Forbes, an American billionaire, saying the same thing on Fox News seriously. He was told about the rise of the water, of the oceans that will bring catastrophes in 100 years. He said literally, and I listened again and I noted down, I find absurd to change my behavior today for something that happened 100 years. So that guy's probably, I guess he has no kids, or he doesn't care for their children. So basically, and I think one of the great environment scientists said, yes, it is an altruism question, the question of the environment. So you see, if you want to bring around the same table, scientists, doctors, politicians, men of science who studied environment, social workers, people who are involved day to day in relieving suffering, they need to have a common concept to make a better world together, except a few nuts like some we see today. Most people want a better world. But they need a concept to work together, to unite those 3 times scale. And selfishness is not going to do the job. You are going to magnify your returns now. You are going to be selfish all the way, and you don't care for future generation. So more consideration for others. You go towards social justice. You remedy to poverty in the midst of plenty. You have an economy with solidarity, with care, caring economics. We also did a Mind and Life meeting in Zurich on caring economics. There's a book about that. In the midterm, you will make sure that the conditions of life allow for thriving. Once I was in a business school somewhere in Brussels, and they said, well, the role of government is not to make people altruistic and happy. I said, no, of course, but at least to have the structure and the way that people can do it without being completely raided by the free riders, who dominate the an economy without any regulation. Always the free rider, rule the game. So people who trust each other, they have no chance. So there's all kinds of things that we can do so that people do thrive and that people can cooperate, because other studies have shown that most people are ready to cooperate if they trust each other. So trust has been going down in many countries. So all these things can be done in the midterm. And in the long term, having more consideration for others is the only practical answer to make sure that our future generation will not inherit a completely damaged environment and suffer tremendously. If we go to the worst prediction, and we are not so close to going to that, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, it's an entirely different planet. Population could be reduced to 1 billion, which we say, well, that will take care of overpopulation, but at cost of how much suffering? In Europe, they are all crazy about the migrants and so forth. 250 million climate migrants might come by 20, 30 years if we go that way. So it's nothing to compare with what's happening now. If you look at the COVID, all the, sorry to go on, all the various last 20, 30 years, all the viral problems all came to the same way. I mean, same origin, unhealthy relation with other species and nature. If you look at Ebola, AIDS, they came from, encroaching on natural environment in Africa and so forth, chimpanzees and others. Then, the SARS, the avian flu, porcine flu, the COVID, not the COVID, but the others, mostly came from, this industrial farming, where we have 100,000 chicken in a place ruled by 20 people, so it cannot be healthy. So all these sort of unbalanced relation with other species brought most of those viral epidemics of the last 20 years. So all these things are warning signs that we should really recalibrate and go towards more altruism. So it's not a luxury, it's not an utopia, it's a very pragmatic concept. Maybe it won't work, there are a lot of contrary forces, but it's up to us after all, isn't it? So, sorry to take so much time. Thank you.
So Matthieu, amidst all your wonderful talk, you were also very mindful of the time. You finished at exactly the time we had scheduled. So this is an living example of mindfulness also, I guess. So you see, the monk here is why the French love him and call him a rock star. I've always enjoyed his combination of quotes from scientific research along with his spiritual quest, and his lessons that he's learned from the Himalayan regions, and in particular the Buddhist masters. So it's always a wonderful, humbling experience to listen to Matthieu expound all his visions and all his scientific research together. Thank you, Matthieu, for this one. So we have now half an hour exactly for a question and answer session, and I'm sure Dr. Bhagawan Koirala is also very eager to answer all your questions. We have two mics here with us from Pratik and Anu. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hands and then we can ask either of the two gentlemen here. I think we should limit the question to two at a time, and if there is something similar to the question that has been asked, then we can again, have that question, and then, we can put it together.
Honorable monks and very respectable and knowledgeable audience, and Dr. Koirala, it is an immense pleasure to have myself to hear your enriched and very wealthy experience of the global what's happening about the compassion, what is happening across the world, and the practical application. Just two questions arose in my mind. I'm a student, just to introduce, I'm also a student of Vipassana meditation for the last 23 years, which I do religiously 3 times a day, now 3 times a day. Earlier, for the last 23 years, I've been practicing at least 2 hours a day, morning, evening, and compassion is definitely a very important part of the meditation. My question, my inquisitiveness to Dr. Matthieu is, being a monk, the Buddhism and the compassion you talked about, Dalai Lama's repeated and very immense, profound, the need of compassion in today's world, which is a dire necessity, as it is happening in every part of the world. I'm now studying the Abhidhamma also, the theoretical portion, to understand. And today's when I got the invitation about heart and mind, I was very excited actually. Heart, what is heart? What is mind? What is mind? Where is the mind? Probably a little bit of clarification if you could make on that. Is the mind inside the brain? Inside the skull? What are we talking about? Heart and mind. We talk about global compassion, practical applications, but where is the mind? That is one question. And then what is heart? Is it just a machine which just pumps blood? When we are talking of heart and mind, how does it relate to Dr. Koirala and Dr. Matthieu? What is heart? Is it just a machine which just pumps blood, 24 hours a day and all from your born till or before mother's womb till we die? What is that engine actually? So the topic, which we very interestingly found, mind and heart. What is mind? What is heart? With your such a huge experience, if you could illuminate a little bit on this, I would be so grateful.
Thank you.
Now, second question.
Okay. So,
if I'm allowed, we talked about compassion. In one point, the enlightened Buddha has said, I have read with my own eyes. He said, "Be selfish, be self-centered." What does he mean with that?
Be selfish.
Selfish. Buddha says, monks, be selfish. I think what he's trying to, what I understood with that was, I will tell you, what my understanding from my study of Abhidhamma was that, know your, you cannot be compassionate until you have cleansed the dirt within you. So, your primary responsibility to be compassionate is towards yourself. That means your responsibility is to clean the dirt within yourself. Then only can be compassionate. If you have a lot of dirt and you want to be compassionate, it's sort of impossible. And I don't know what is the practical dimension of this. Maybe some enlightenment on what the Buddha has said, be selfish, and then what we are talking about being compassionate. I would be happy to hear a little bit about these two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Two very deep questions to start with. Let me just summarize it. And if I'm wrong in summarizing, please help me with it. So basically, he wants, the first question is regarding the correlation between heart and mind. What is mind and what is heart? Is it the literal heart or literal mind, or maybe there is a difference between mind and brain aspect? What do you mean exactly by mind? So this is the angle that he wants to cover. Yeah. And then the second part is the Buddha's quote regarding being self-centered and selfish. Why did Buddha quote regarding this? And he also summarized it saying that maybe it's to do with your own mindfulness to know yourself before you can, be at the service of the others. So this is what he interprets, but you would like your this thing on it. Thank you.
Well, that's not the reason I should be speaking. Thank you. I'm not sure I can answer your question, but Matthieu kind of directed that question to me first. He will, of course, continue and explain. Well, I, as a physician and surgeon, I see heart almost every day, not today, but it has a biological definition that we all understand. I don't think we need an explanation to that. And, it beats automatically, billions of gallons of blood during pumps during lifetime, and it has its own millions of years of history of evolution. And in fact, that evolution is, interestingly, as a scientist, we study the embryology within the 9 months. The way it's kind of formed, it's an exciting science in itself, the way it's formed, how many vulnerabilities it has to go through to be completed the way it is today. It's not, it's not a geographic anatomy. It's very complexly devised structure, but that's all biology. And brain also has its structural form, shape, and functions. One thing I understand from is there a neurologist or a neuroscientist here, neurosurgeon? He's not. I mean, he probably knows a lot of that. It has so many dimensions of a brain function. Some are structural, some are electrical, some are thoughts, higher cortical function versus the deeper emotional centers that control the emotions. That's kind of hard to differentiate, but there are some biological ways to understand that. One thing is clear, that the functions of brain is extremely difficult to explain. Can brain know the brain fully? That question, I think, is still unanswered to be. Maybe he can throw some lights on it. But heart also has second dimension, as historical writers here, the emotional side of it, follow your heart if your mind, does not understand what to do. Those expressions probably have, again, a biological basis to that, because mind always is sending the impulses through his autonomic nervous system. Mostly these emotions are guided through the brain stem and the deep brain functions, hippocampus and other structures, and that sends stimulus to the heart, and that's kind of, we feel, without being cognizant of why are we thinking that. So I think there are some explanations that our neuroscientists and neurologists can explain, but this philosophical terms of it, I think there's a lot more that you could draw out of this. So as I said, I'm a bullet point guy. I understand it in a very simplistic manner. I think it's enough for me, but the rest is up to you to explain.
Okay, it's easy, huh? In the late 90s, in the beginning of the Mind and Life Institute, at some point, neuroscientists Francisco Varela and Richard Davidson went to Dharamsala, and they demonstrated the EEG to some practitioners and the Dalai Lama. And so everybody was very interested. You put all these electrodes, and then when you start putting all the electrodes, and they say we are going to see your mind activity, all the monks start laughing. So they said they thought that because they look funny with the electrodes, and they were sort of teasing them. And then when they translated, they said, "No, you're looking in the wrong place. The mind is here in the heart." So anyway, that also shows that we know, of course, that the brain basically, is this central sort of thing that even correlate and receive signal from the whole body and the heart in particular, but also from the viscera and everything. And so this, also the perception that you have of being embodied, interoception is very important, and all these things, we know about that. At the same time, we say good heart, intelligent mind. So we try to also have a bit reductionist, saying, okay, the goodness, compassion must be localized physically in the heart, which doesn't make sense. There's some correspondence, the heart being the most vital organ, because we didn't know so much about the brain, which has 300 billion neurons and everything. But somehow those symbolic things relate quite well with our own experience. And we know from the vagal tone, the sort of fight or flight or reaction, or the calming reaction, that when we have a more calming reaction, it has to do also with the heart. We know that compassion has an effect, direct effect on the heartbeat also. So there's all kinds of things. But we should not be either too reductionist. And so now to see what is mind, what is heart, this is one of the biggest debate. The nature of consciousness is the debate by excellence of neuroscience in this century, and it's probably going to be for quite some time. There's so many issues. In very, very short, there is so-called the soft problem and the hard problem. The soft problem is some neuroscientists say, okay, now we are going to map 300 billion neurons. And there are two projects. There's a Blue Brain project in Switzerland and one in the US. They mostly start, I think they're going to stop soon because it's almost impossible. But anyway, that's the idea. And then they will be able to tell you everything that happened in the smallest neuron when you see the color red or when you feel love or hate. Okay, they will tell you everything. Then what happens? Unless you experience that, you have no clue of what it is to see red, feel love, feel anger, and so forth. So the hard problem, which philosopher, phenomenologist, and also good scientists like David Chalmers and others said, is no matter what, you cannot replace experience by a description, a third-person description. It doesn't tell you anything about experience, and without experience, there's no such thing as consciousness. What are we talking about? So that's also what Buddhists say, what phenomenologists say. Consciousness is a primary fact. I mean, you cannot speak of consciousness stepping out of consciousness. You can make discourses about the brain, consciousness already there. So, and then some philosophers get out of it easily, you know, like Daniel Dennett. He says, well, there's no heart problem because consciousness doesn't exist. It's an illusion. So anyway, it's a huge debate. Myself, I did an 8-year dialogue with a neuroscientist called Wolf Singer. We came here, we did twice some part of our dialogue in Namo Buddha. And we did a book in English, it's called Beyond the Self, and there's 60 pages on debating this issue. Of course, we didn't get to the bottom of the issue, but it is the question. So in very short, if consciousness is 100% reduced to brain activity, which is correlated with, definitely, there's no question, then there's no, you know, we ended there. But, you know, who knows? There's a lot of possibilities to investigate. There are things which seems to be difficult to explain just by that. In any case, on the philosophical point of view, you could never get rid of experience. It starts with experience, and this happens within experience. So without consciousness, we can't speak about anything about that. We couldn't speak of the world. Nothing will make sense. So this is where the sort of debate is now, and I think it's going to go on for quite a while. Okay. So now, in terms of mind and heart, body and mind, of course, this is all interconnected, and we know that very well. Yes.
Thank you. So we have another question.
Dr. Ricard, Dr. Koirala, thank you very much for an engaging conversation. The concept of sustainable harmony really resonated with me. And I wonder if you could say a few words about the role of the Sangha, the monk body, for sharing this concept with the lay community. Thank you.
Can you repeat that question again? Like sharing the concept you said, right?
The concept of sustainable harmony. So from the monk body into the lay community, where is the connection between the two of sharing this concept?
Yeah, the sustainable harmony part. She wants to know where is the connection between the monk or the Sangha and the lay people. Thank you.
And maybe some examples.
Well, I know I cannot give a... I'm not sure. I think sustainable harmony, of course, is a wide concept that applies to each and every of us, so monks are no exception. Well, just basically Sangha means virtuous community. So whatever they do, they are supposed to be an example and, you know, walk the talk. I remember during the 2015 earthquake, you know, we tried to get really involved with the session clinic, and every 2 days, I believe, for 3 months, there was a truck going with the doctors, nurses, and some 10 or 15 monks going to many villages to distribute what was needed. So we've ended up, I think, helping 200,000 people in 600 villages, 600 tons of rice and everything. So there was a Kathmandu Post title, "They Walk the Talk," for once, yes. So in fact, that was what's supposed to do, the Sangha. And the fact that we had 500 monks, very well disciplined. You know, the day of the earthquake, there was 1,000 people receiving teaching in the temple. So it could have been a catastrophe that collapsed. And there was, how many? 4,000 or 5,000 outside in the courtyard with a big tent. So they stayed there for 15 days because that was a kind of open place but covered with cloth. And we give them basic tea and a little food. So they feel secure there. So most of them stayed. So, I mean, we tried, you know, a sense of virtuous community. But, you know, there's ideally, that's what we should do. We are just supposed to serve, also to study. But the fact is, you know, this should be the aim of everyone. So to become a better person, to better serve others. So there's no better, I think, goal that we can do. Be good, do good. You know, I have a few, when Doctor was speaking, I wrote because you said something about that quote from your friend from Singapore. You know, I have a friend who was a wonderful Jesuit father called Père Serac. He died 95. For 50 years almost, he worked in South India, helping 50,000 kids. He had a motorbike. He was going everywhere. He was making school. feeding them, and so forth. So it was so sweet. One day I met him in Paris. He said, he coming out of the subway. He said, people are so beautiful, but they don't know. And then he said, one day he had a big conference in India. He was a priest. He said, I love Indian women. He said, for big silence. He said, 500 million of them. And then he was in a refugee camp in Cambodia after the Khmers. And he was hugging 80 years old lady. And he told her, you are so beautiful. And she said, nobody is telling me that. So he wrote a book called What is Not Given is Lost. I think that's a very good title. And then Dr. Schweitzer said, love is the only thing that doubles every time you give it. So this is perfect investment. You should get Nobel Prize of Economy for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthieu. Wonderful. I have one, before I get back to you, Priti, I have one question from Zoom. This is also being broadcast live in Zoom. Am I getting sound here? Yeah. So this is being broadcast live in Zoom and Facebook and other social medias. There is one question from Zoom by Dr. Om Kurmi, and he says, in the recent, I think it's addressed to you, Matthieu. He says, in the recent UN report on happiness index, most of the European countries come in top 20. Nepal has been ranked the happiest in South Asia. Do you think these findings are based on factors on what matters to heart and mind? Anything Nepal and South Asian countries can do to improve the ranking?
So it's an index of well-being, yes?
Happiness index.
Yeah, happiness index.
So happiness index is a huge issue. Because very often those questions are too simplistic. Basically, it's, are you very happy, moderately happy, moderately unhappy, and very unhappy? It doesn't go anywhere. There's a global happiness report every year. I went to the United Nations with the GNH team of Bhutan, and actually there was a resolution that well-being should be part of the 17 new priorities, and we had a 2-day conference at Columbia, and then one morning at the UN with, at that time was Ban Ki-moon and so forth. And so how to implement that, So the thing is yes, so there was some efforts, like, everybody said Bhutan is the happiest place in the happiest country. It's not the case. They made the idea of gross national happiness that was ridiculed by many. But there at that meeting, Joseph Stiglitz with Nobel Prize of Economy, he said, don't laugh, it's a serious thing, because it's basically based on 3 indexes. One is the monetary index, that's basically the GDP, which is normally what all nations measure. One is social wealth, and one is environmental wealth. So it's a very interesting concept. So what is social wealth? Plus and minus. And they make the account at the end of the year, they're supposed to. So listen, for instance, you sell tobacco. Okay, it's good for GDP. Then people go to be treated for lung cancer. It's good for GDP. Then you pay for the mortuary and all this stuff. It's good for GDP. But they count it as a minus for social wealth. Now, volunteer work in France is 12%, equivalent of 12% of GDP. It's not counted in GDP. While drug trafficking and armed trafficking, European Union, and prostitution is counted as GDP because it's monetary sort of movement. So that doesn't make much sense. Environmental wealth, they calculated that the forest standing is 20 times their GDP. So okay, we keep it, it's a treasure, it's an environmental wealth. If we cut it, then we devastate the country. For a few years we'll have a lot of money, GDP, but then we devastate the country. So those triple index, is very interesting, and that's also a lot to do with well-being, the balance between those 3. So in short, they are more or less sophisticated, and some years you see always the Scandinavian country being the happiest country for some, because there is a trust, there's more social justice, there's all kinds of reasons. Sometimes if you measure it differently, once it was one of those African countries, and I don't know how they measure, but the reason is that people were there was a lot of, how do we say, thank you, Anila. There was a lot of richness in social interaction. And so from that, if you measure from that criteria, then it's, you say, oh, that's the happy country. So in short, there was an interesting study by the, what's it called? Oh, no, I forgot. This one of those, the group of the 30 wealthiest nations. Comment ça s'appelle déjà? Anyway, they asked 10 questions, what is the most important factor for happiness? And they gave different things like income and so forth. Number one, income came about 5. So it's important, but number one, quality of human relation. You see, why people are unhappy at work? Because they can't get along with their boss or their colleagues and so forth. Places where it feels good to work also prosper better because people are more motivated. So how you get a happier human relationship? By cooperation and kindness, not by reckless competition. So you see, you come back to this idea that a more cooperative, benevolent society is also a happier society. So altogether, it depends what you measure. So it's very, very difficult to say.
Thank you, Matthieu. Another very insightful and wonderful example.
So
Answer?
one just last thing is that inequalities is really a factor that is detrimental to happiness, to life expectancy, to the level of education, and so forth. And surprisingly, a wealthy country like the US is not doing well in equality. And you have seen that the life expectancy has been slightly sort of not progressing so fast, that the level of primary education is also going down somehow. It was same in Russia for last studies. So excessive inequalities certainly means a level of unhappiness that is greater. And that's a new big studies has confirmed that again. Yeah.
Thank you. So, okay, yeah. We'll take in 2 questions now because we are almost out of time. So, Mausamji and then maybe Preeti after that. Thank you.
So, I have a question. As Buddhist system is full of mind training, and we have Dr. Koirala, he's talking about the heart training. And he already mentioned like how mind training is contributing our good heart. But my question is, how we can practice both together? Because I think it's a very good opportunity for us that we are finding you both together. How we can do both practice together? Thank you.
Okay, I'll start quickly because we always speak of mindfulness. Why don't we speak of heartfulness? Then it's done. Isn't it? Or at least benevolent mindfulness. I had this argument with some of the mindfulness guys. They say, look, what do you call it? A sniper. He has to be so mindful. No, he has to be there all the time, attentive to kill whoever he has been told to kill. He has to be, not disturbed by his emotion. They speak of non-judgmental mindfulness. He should be non-judgmental because he was told to kill someone. He doesn't care who he is, what it is, how is his children and parents. So if you look at the technical definition, a sniper and a psychopath are okay. So that will not lead you to be a good human being. So I think, of course, if you do practice mindfulness properly, you do the MBSR, the way that John Kabat-Zinn is doing, 6 weeks training, they bring naturally the compassion, the kindness, and all the time. But I think it should be spelled out right from the start and say we speak about caring mindfulness. Then there's no risk for snipers and psychopaths to use it in the wrong way. So in a way, and also you get 2 for the price of 1, because if you train your mind in compassion and kindness, you also have to be attentive and mindful, otherwise you'll be distracted all the time. So you infuse that space of attention, which is very important. Without attention, you get nowhere. William James, the founder of modern psychology, said if you could educate attention, that will be the education per excellence. Which means we need attention to do anything, and we have a distracted mind a lot. We are very distracted, multitasking and all that. But attention is a tool, and then you should keep it, but use it to cultivate wholesome qualities like loving kindness and compassion. Yes.
Of course, I can't be, I cannot disagree with him. I can only add one sentence from our own professional practice. Being fully attentive, giving all you have, being focused, is a kind of meditation. It breaks the vicious cycle of stress, damaging heart, and vice versa. So I think, for example, when I operate on a very regular case, I just enjoy this, and that kind of breaks all my stresses, and I'm basically gives me relief. So I think paying attention, giving your full attention to something that you do, being fully mindful, is also a way of improving your spirituality, and I think that's part of meditation. I think.
Yes, there's this concept that I think Doctor must know very well. This concept of flow, and surgeons, when they do long operation, they get in that state of flow, where their attention is effortful. They feel that they are. There was an Olympics champion of downhill skiing. They say, I felt like a river. It was perfect and effortless. So at some point you get that. You lose the notion of time, I don't know if it's your case, and the notion of self-identification. And that's a state that is also, as you say, feel good in a way. So because you are less focused on yourself. And it doesn't require the same kind of purposeful effort, which makes you tired, because you cannot force your attention forever. Just to quote one of the studies we did, and some of our monks participated in that, it's called the continuous performance task. You see on the screen small numbers, like, say, this side, very small, like size 12 in the big screen. And they changed 4 times a second. Now, each time you see 0, you push a button. That looks like really not very brainy. But if you do that, 4 times a second, you tend to forget to press when it's 0 and press when it's 8 or something. You make mistakes. And that's why they change the air control traffic people every 20 minutes, because they can't maintain. So the curve goes down very fast, like that. So we sent to Princeton and other places some meditators who did several years of retreat. And then they sent the computer with the software, and we did that in the retreat. So first we did 10 minutes, and then they said they could do 45 minutes. Normally they don't do. So first of all, those guys, they did the first 10 minutes and immediately did the 45 minutes. And 2 of them, that means 1,000 times about pushing. There are 2 of them 100%, 0 mistake. And the most revealing is one of them said, what's the matter? Shall I continue? That means a skill is consummate when you do it well and easily, effortless. So then there was another study following that. They studied beginners, mid sort of experienced meditators, said we did 5,000 hours of practice, and then long-term meditators, 20, 30, 40,000 hours. So interestingly, the beginners, they were lot of effort and poor result. Their activation of the attention area was very activated, but they were not succeeding. Their curve were going down. So the mid one, middle experience, they were doing it well, but with a lot of effort. And what they found with the long-term practitioner, they were doing very well, but the area was not so activated. It was natural. So that's what we call skill. So entering the flow and doing your profession, you do it well, you can do it long. Of course, it can be exhausting, but there's a sense also of going on and flourishing and flow, and which allows you to do it.
Re-energizes yourself.
Yes.
Thank you. So last question. We have to limit this to last question because Matthieu has been talking for quite a long time. So Preeti, please go ahead.
So my question is, I used to be very critical and negative about the politicians and these high elite people and who wouldn't have any influence over bad roads, pollution, about the negativities around and everything. And then I met a monk who, or I don't know who, but he told me that you are sending so much negativity towards these people, and all that they get from general public is criticisms and negativity. So how will they ever get into the positive flow and do something constructive? So my question is, can't the long-term meditators, the one who have been working on mind training and all, get together and do a long puja or ceremony or something and pass wisdom does that work? Does something like collective consciousness work on changing the mindset of the politicians and these elite people who have power and influence?
Yeah, very interesting question, she said. Like, she initially indulged in a lot of negative thoughts towards politicians because of, some of their actions were extremely unsatisfactory. But one of the monks told her, like, you are amidst a lot of people who are sending all these negative emotions or thoughts towards the politicians, and they will never be able to have any positive. Yes, because of all the negative energy that they're getting. So her question regarding this is, if you, through meditation, pujas or wishes, wish positive thoughts on others, am I going in the right direction? Pujas, and then pass on, you build this positive vibe or positive energy, does that have a positive outcome in someone else's life or in a society in general?
Maybe you should elect Dr. Koirala and Dr. Ruit as president and prime minister or something like that. And the road will be perfect. Well. You know what to say. First of all, I hope no meditators has bad thoughts about anyone, including politicians. Even Donald Trump has the Buddha nature somehow. He doesn't know very much about it, but yeah, but it's true. So in that sense, there's no one that is fundamentally, there's a basic goodness that sometimes is quite hidden, but it's still there. I once went to a high security jail in France. They asked me to come. And they were quite happy because they said, look, they said sometimes people come and they say, well, you either kill someone or do something terrible. You are born as human nature is bad anyway. And they say on top of that, we are locked in jail for 25 years. It's a pretty dim future. So when I said, well, no matter what, there's something in every human being that is a nugget of gold. It can be fall into the worst disgusting place, but if you pick up the gold and polish it, actually the gold itself never changed. So the potential is always there, no matter how far it is, no matter how hidden it is. It's not Nelson Mandela, after 30 years, he was speaking about his jailers. He said, if you look deep within, you'll always find something good in human beings. So that, they say, is so relieving, because otherwise they are triply caught, by some kind of birth of defect, in a way, in human nature, having done something terrible and being locked in jail. So the little bright future. So I think we should keep that. And now in terms of meditators getting together, well, I don't know. As the Dalai Lama said, once there was the chief minister of, what is that in Patna? What is the state? Bihar, yes. He inaugurated a new Buddhist temple and told the Dalai Lama, now thanks to the Lord Buddha's prayer, prosperity will come in Bihar. So the Dalai Lama said, well, if it was up to the Buddha's prayer, it would have been done since 2,500 years. So he said, no guarantee, he said. And I've seen him signing books in Tibetan to a professor in Lausanne University. He said, and he signed in Tibetan, and the professor asked, what did you write? He said, to so-and-so, with my prayers, Dalai Lama. He said, no guarantee.
Thank you, Matthieu. So that concludes our Q&A session, and I'm really sorry for many of you who have questions, but I'm sure this was very fruitful. So to conclude this talk program, I would like to invite Mr. Bhuvan Dahal from Kathmandu Institute of Child Health to give a concluding remarks and also to close this program. Thank you.
Respected doctors on the dais and respected all the people present here on the floor, namaskar and good evening. It was a wonderful presentation from both the doctors who are experts and who are known as gods. In fact, one doctor has the name God and another doctor has been practicing the way to attain the God's heaven or whatever. In case of Buddhism also, I think there is a principle of reincarnation and purity of the mind. So we are very lucky to listen to both the distinguished people. They taught us about the importance of compassion. And I was expecting one question to Matthieu, that how he became the happiest person on the earth, but that question didn't come to him. Maybe in course of
I escaped that one.
in course of having this high tea, maybe we can ask the secret of being the happiest person on the earth. Okay. So that opportunity is still available.
Okay, I tell you, this is the biggest joke in the world.
Okay. Okay. So when we watch YouTube, that question was asked to him and he was answering like that. But in course of high tea, maybe he will share some secrets, and some of the secrets he has already shared with us. That is compassion. That makes us one of the happiest people on the earth. So we are very lucky, and today was Saturday, and you had to spend time with your family. Head and heart was to be there, but head and heart has been given to both the doctors, and at the same time, that is for the benefit of all of us. So I would like to express not vote of thanks, rather I would like to express vote of gratitude. I would like to express hearty gratitude to both the doctors and at the same time all the people present here for encouraging us. So on behalf of the organizer, KH and Karuna, both of them KK, and at the same time our both doctors come from Palpa and Paris, PP. So it was a wonderful combination today. So once again I would like to express hearty gratitude and conclude this program, and I request you to join for high tea. Thank you so much.